Hey everyone, welcome back to Dog 101. I'm your host Nick, and as always a disclaimer, this is not a informed podcast per se. I mean, yes, I was a dog trainer for 5 years. Yes, I worked at a pet store for 10. Yes, I was a dog groomer for 1. But this is just definitely me telling you some advice that I've accrued through knowledge, much like somebody who shall go unnamed, but I never got, really official training from, like, say, the ABC, Animal Behavior College. So I'm not a behaviorist. I am just somebody that, could probably point you in the right direction, but always recommends that you do your own research beyond just me. Don't think that this is the end all be all. But today I want to talk to you about if you have a negative behavior and the best way to de escalate it. And that's going to be through two specific methods. One is it's not them, it's you. It's hard for people to hear, but most likely, if a negative behavior keeps on getting worse and worse, it's because that you are unconsciously reinforcing it. And then the other is going to be the 1 week rule, where you figure out a point, a way to address the negative behavior issue and to stick to it for at least a week and then see how it's going from there. Most people give up on what would have been a good plan way too early, and we'll get into it. But those are the two main points of focus. So I'm obviously not going to be able to cover everything. I'm going to be able to throw in a couple of examples and just give you the kind of overall philosophy. And then from there, hopefully by the point that you're seeing this, I will have finally figured out how I'm going to do a interactive, back and forth kind of dog training thing. But this is definitely one you want to keep in the back of your mind so that if I reference it, later on, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I remember you did say to do that. So, let's just jump right on into it. Let's just pick at random, negative behavior. So, for instance, they might have a bit of healer or, herding dog in them. And so they're always coming up and, behind you and nipping at your ankles. And as much as you fret and fuss and tell them to stop it, it just seems to keep getting worse. And you can't figure out why, besides the fact that they have it in their DNA. I addressed this in a breed episode earlier. Some dogs are going to have tendencies based on what we initially bred them for the job they were supposed to do. Specific breeds actually still have that in them, even later on, generations down the road when, it's like their dad and their dad's dad and their dad's dad did not herd, but they still somehow have that instinct in them. It's nuts, it's crazy, but it does happen. So, what are we going to do about it? Well, whatever you've been doing, if it keeps getting worse, you're doing it wrong. And it's hard for you to, it's hard for people to accept because initially it seems to make sense to them. So for instance, if we're going to go with the example of the ankle biting, well, you go, ow, to signify to the dog that it hurt, and, maybe jerk your leg away, as in, it's like, hey, I'm going to get the thing that you're trying to bite away from you so that you know that I don't want you to, go after that. And if it keeps getting worse, well, here's a pretty good reason. You are acting the way that they would like you to, unfortunately. So, first of all, without even knowing the reason why, like, I have enough knowledge that I will be able to give you pretty much a peek into the dog's head as far as why they're doing a thing and why the thing that you're doing is actually helping instead of hurting, them to keep on doing it. And so, I will give you, the reason why in a sec, but, just so you know, it's like whether you know why or not, this is when the 1 week rule comes into effect. So if you pulling away and saying ow has not been working, in fact, it's been getting worse, do something else. Do something completely opposite, even if it doesn't make sense in your head at first, okay? So in this case, instead of pulling away and going ow, give no reaction and face towards them, and I'll, give you the reason why. Because if you jerk away, you go ow. First of all, the ow shows that you're giving them attention. Most likely in this scenario, you had other things that you needed to do, or you were just going on a walk and they were bored by just doing the walk. Some dogs actually that's not enough simulation. It's just going on a boring walk that they've already sniffed that particular area already. But what they're trying to do is get a reaction out of you, and you gave it to them. You went ow. So even though you think that you gave them a negative reaction, to them, it's just like how there's no such thing as bad publicity. For a dog, that is very true with attention. You could be yelling at them, scolding them. The whole time you're doing it, they seem like they're sorry for what they did because they're showing you the what to a human looks like the shame face and body positioning. If this is audio only, then you know what I'm talking about. The wide eyes, the lowered head, the curved back. That regardless of what they're doing with their body, they're still internally wagging because, well, they did what they were trying to do, is they got your attention. So if that's what they're going for, then that's what you take away from them. So, it seems counterintuitive to not react to a dog biting your ankle. You think you want to nip that in the bud. Well, one way you can do that is by not giving them what they want, and that is by saying ow and addressing that. And then the other thing is that if you jerk your leg away, seems like a natural reaction. You want to get your leg out of the danger zone. Well, that is exactly what prey would do. And so if you act like prey and then they get rewarded by that and then they continue to treat you as prey. I mean, this is a hard lesson. Again, this is an adult podcast. I'm talking to the adults here. For the kids, you're going to hear some hard lessons if you ignore the fact that this is not for kids only. The whole reason why a dog enjoys a squeaker toy is because it sounds like a animal dying. It sounds like an animal screaming out in pain just before it dies. It was a rough lesson for me. It's going to be a rough lesson for you, but they have it in them. And, if they didn't, then they never would have survived as wolves before we bred them into becoming the canines that we know today. So they have a natural instinct to crave that. Like if you ever, I'm going to get a little army real quick, but, if you ever watch Jarhead, they train you in order to be addicted to and crave the pink mist, which is when you shoot somebody and they their head explodes into a pink mist. It's a little gruesome, but I mean that's basically what a dog has that desire for. That's why I do try and stay away from any stuffed animals that resemble actual animals. I try, and if it's going to be stuffed at all, which I avoid anyway, just because pulling out the stuffing and making the whole house look like you're in a snow globe is not desirable for me. But yeah, if I am going to give them a stuffed animal, it's going to be something like weird, like like bright orange colors, completely not animal shaped. But anyway, I digress. That they have that in them, and it stinks, and it is what it is, and they can definitely be trained to be gentle towards all creatures, but they have it in them, and it's something you need to keep in mind when you're going to address that. So acting the opposite of a wounded animal, the jerking away, going ow, because it seems like that's triggering something deep in their psyche. Act the opposite. Like if they do try and go for that, if you turn around and face them and then you actually move forward towards them. I mean, like literally the opposite of how prey acts. I'm going to make an example. Like I don't know if you've ever heard, but it's like, let's say that you're, you know, out in the wild, and for whatever reason you're in tiger territory. Not the smartest thing in the world, but you actually see the tiger before they before they attack, which is rare. But if you do see a tiger, the last thing you want to do is turn around and run because it's going to trigger their predator instinct. Instead, you need to act the opposite. You need to act like an animal that might be able to go toe to toe with them. Is your best bet. If you don't have a weapon, go, act, like aggressive and big and rawr, like scary towards them. And there's a little bit more chance that they might be like, well, this ain't worth the effort, and then take off rather than if you go oh, and then you start running. They're just like, yeah, that's how prey acts, and then they're gonna tackle you from behind. Anytime an animal is acting, dominant towards you, you responding, in turn. Like for instance, a predator never wants to see your face. Like they always like to try and do sneak attacks from behind. So the more you face a animal that's acting in a predatory manner, and in this case, it's actually just herding instinct, but in a way, it is kind of predatory, where it's just like nip you in the ankle, make you do something, nip you in the ankle, make you do something. So you act the opposite. You face towards them. It's just like, oh, you want my foot? Oh, I thought you wanted the foot. No, you don't want the foot? I thought you wanted the foot. Like stuff like that. The opposite of what they were looking for can often deter them. And again, this is where it's going to tie into the 1 week rule. Keep doing that for at least a week because they're going to test you. It is in a dog's nature to test. So, for instance, if you were in a pack of wolves, again, we're going to go back to wolves on many occasions because for whatever reason, they still have it in their DNA because that's what they were before. So, a pack of wolves is going to be an alpha. That's not to be helped. And just so you know, between the human and dog relationship, you don't need to be alpha. You can be the benevolent leader of the group, but you're not the alpha of the pack. And that's a very important distinction. It's one that I mention quite often, but basically you don't. If you're going to act like an alpha, then that means you have to go full alpha. That means that you're going to have to, snarl, bite, and basically be kind of a bully if you want them to do what you want. And that's not the way humans need to train a dog because, well, we learned a better way. we do it through positive reinforcement, so they think it's their own idea, and they actually seek out that activity instead of being bullied into it. And then the second that you drop your guard, they're going to take advantage. So basically, if there's an alpha, then there's a beta, and a beta's job is to make sure that the alpha is still on point. So if the alpha, seems to be slipping, getting old, getting sick, not being the best alpha, well then it's the beta's job to step up and become the new alpha of the group, because everybody has a lifespan and a timeline, and so if the alpha is no longer the best leader to go out on the hunt, well, then that's going to make the pack suffer. So that's why you just don't want to be an alpha, period. But just keep in mind that a dog is going to have beta tendencies oftentimes, and so it's in them to test you to make sure that you're going to be consistent with whatever rules you set in place. That's why it's so important if you get a puppy to not, get them adjusted for the first week. I mean, bringing home a dog is the exact opposite of pretty much any other animal video that I have said before. It's like whenever I talk about bringing home, say, a mouse or a hamster, I say for the first couple of days, just leave them alone, let them get adjusted, and then go ahead and start trying to establish your relationship. Like, hey, I can handle you if you're up for that. Whereas with a dog, if it's a puppy, an adult dog that you adopted, whatever, know what the rules are going to be from day one. Establish them from day one. That way the dog doesn't get confused when you suddenly start enforcing them when they think that it's something that they did that caused the change, and not, that's what the rules were always supposed to be. So I digress. So, try doing the facing and then, offering the foot method for a week. Now, the week rule, this is how it works. So if the behavior starts to go away after the first week, continue. You probably figured out the solution. If the behavior stays the same after 1 week, well, continue for one more week, because maybe they're testing you and they've won in the past. Most likely they have. Most likely you've tried to change a dog's food and then the dog didn't like it. They turn their nose up at it and you're like, okay, I'm so sorry. Here's your old food back. Okay, you don't like that anymore. Well, then here's some, boiled chicken. Oh, you don't like that? Here's some ground hamburger. All right, you can't bend to the dog's whim, because they're going to realize that, oh, I actually do have some control in the situation, and they're going to exercise that as much as they can. So you definitely want to try it for a week. And then if it stays the same, go for another week, and then hopefully it's going to break it. Because there's nothing worse than if you were doing the right thing, but the dog tests you, and then after 7 days you gave up, and they were going to give up on day 8. That's the worst. Now, if you try something new and it gets worse, during that week, well then at the end of the week, okay, abandon it and try a new tactic, because clearly what you're doing, whether you realize it or not, and if it makes sense in the moment, or if it makes sense 20 years later when you hear a weird podcast where it's like, that's why they did that. Well, that's the reason, obviously what you're doing isn't working because it's getting worse during that week. So abandon it, regroup, try a different tactic. But, that's generally how the week rule, works out. And I'll try to use that, in a couple different examples so that you kind of catch on to what I'm trying to go for here. But, yeah. So, so a lot of times, if at all possible, the first step, rather than trying to change something that you're doing, and this is going to be rare that you can actually do this, but usually the first step is to try to take yourself out of the equation entirely and see if it's something that you are doing. So I think that one of the best examples for this is got to be puppy playtime. I touched upon that, I believe, in one of my earlier videos, but this is important enough that I'm going to say it again. So if you have a dog in a playtime situation and you're not an expert on play, and you unintentionally misunderstand what a dog is using as learning behavior on how to control the situation, and you see it as aggression. So if a dog picks a corner, gets overwhelmed, picks a corner, and then any dog that approaches them, they bare their teeth, and if the dog still approaches them, they go, back off, back off, back off, basically is what they're doing. And then you freak out. It's like, okay, the dog's not having fun. This was a bad idea. And you scoop the dog up. Well, dogs are so intuitive to your emotions that a lot of times they're going to pick up on what you're putting down as an example. And in this example, you just said, you absolutely were in danger. I'm going to scoop you out of harm's way, and let's try again next week. Well, next week, they're going to have that memory in their head, and they're going to be like, oh, this is the scary situation. They might exhibit that behavior even sooner, and then you take them away even sooner, and they're like, see, I knew that that's what was going on, and now you've started to lock in, and the escalating behavior becomes so that if a dog sees another dog, they're going to go at the end of their leash and try and bite them. And you're like, where did this come from? You were such a good puppy when I first got you, and now, through no fault of my own, it is your own fault. That, now you're an aggressive dog, and I can't figure out why. Well, it was something that you were doing. So, if you notice that, kind of behavior starting to, happen, there's almost no better way of handling it than just finding a reputable, dog, boarding, place. Put them there for a day, and don't be a dick, and actually tell them ahead of time. It's just like, hey, I'm doing this because my dog's starting to, you know, show some behavior that I'm not totally cool with, but it might just be because of me, and it's picking up on my emotions. So I want to let you know ahead of time. I'm not going to just blindside you and have you put them in with other dogs if they are aggressive, but I think it's me. So, that's why they're here. And so please let me know how it went, at the end of the day. And most people that are, have a boarding place, a bed and biscuit is actually what one of the local places called. Shout out to Alton Bed and Biscuit. I always like to, talk about local businesses whenever I can because, it's tough, especially if you're an independent and you're just, trying to, do stuff on your own and you don't have much, free press. Well, here's some free press for you. Alton Bed Biscuit doesn't give me a dime. So if you go to Alton Bed Biscuit, you tell them about the promo code Nick. You're not going to get a single cent off. But, shout out to them because, our dog, Lilu the Loud, as you probably know her from previous episodes. Lilu, definitely was doing great just before the quarantine. And then afterwards, now, anytime that she sees a dog on the side of the street, like, she will practically have you pull a muscle trying to keep her back because she's just so desperately trying to get to the other dog. And to another person walking their dog, seeing a dog literally on their hind legs at the end of their leash, pulling as hard as they can, and you just straining the other way, seems aggressive. Where that's not the case at all. That's not where she's coming from. But most people can't read dog body language, so that's not at all what's going on. But then the dog, person runs away, and then Lilu's like, "Oh, okay. Well, apparently I got to dial it up to an 11 next time because I thought I was putting out vibes that I really wanted to say hi, but they just ran away. So next time I'm gonna have to try and like really break my dad's back." So, just because of necessary circumstances, we ended up taking her to the Bed and Biscuit, and apparently she was a great player. Without having, the pet parent there to be like, "Oh crap, here's another person with a dog. Here she goes. She's gonna start pulling," and the dog picks up on that. The dog picks up on like, why are you starting to get nervous? How come you're slowing down your pace? Is it because of them? Yeah, I know. And so they actually pick up on little signals that you're giving, whereas you might think that it's the opposite idea that they're getting. It gets so complex. You know what I mean? So like sometimes maybe if you just take yourself out of it, and then you find out, later on, oh no, 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 it's not her, it's you. So now you need to start thinking about how can I act differently with interactions. Maybe I can socialize in different settings. It gives you a great starting point for having a different plan of attack, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So a huge one when I was a dog groomer, and I've already mentioned this before, but I'm going to mention it again because this is a completely different subject. If your dog hates the groomer, and you usually just take them there to get nails done, like something that you're not going to leave and then come back and pick them up for, something you stick around for, like, a quick little, tune up, you know what I mean? Like a little refreshing, brush out, nail trim kind of thing. And so your intuition is to, well, I'm going to stay, watching and, for two reasons. One, I want to make sure that they're doing a good job. And two, I want to make sure that the dog can see me so they don't get stressed out. Well, and then it gets worse each time that you go to the dog groomer to the point where they're like, okay, now you have to have a vet do them because we can't anesthetize the dog and the dog is going to need a muzzle and we don't muzzle the dog. So it's like, you're like, okay, well, obviously you're a bad groomer. You take him to another groomer and then the dog bites the groomer. You're just like, oh my God, who are these horrible groomers? Like the dog would never bite me. All right, well, it's you. You're the one who's stressing them out. So they go to an unfamiliar. All right, so I'll go ahead and like tell you, well, before I do the reveal, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, well, first thing you could have tried was, hey, maybe not being inside of the dog, try going off shopping and come back when they paid you. Seems counterintuitive, but try something different. Stop listening to what makes sense in your head because it's obviously not working and just change tactics and see if it works and then go from there. So now I'll give you the reveal. The reason why the dog is freaking out is because they're in a nervous, uncomfortable situation. All right, it's going to be nervous and uncomfortable. Nail grinding or nail trimming does not feel normal. This is a stranger that they probably don't know that well, which is why a lot of dog groomers will say, you need to come back more often. They're not trying to get more business out of you. They literally know more about dog behavior than you do. And they know if this is a familiar setting, then they're not going to freak out about it as much. So, plus a lot of dogs, at least with nail trimming, a lot of dogs' quicks grow so fast that it's like, yeah, you need to have the dog be seen by me more than, 3 times a year, okay? The nails are growing faster than the dog is wearing them down. So, quit trying to think that I'm trying to squeeze an extra, $10 out of you and just bring the freaking dog back. Like I said, I'm not, it's just it blows my mind that people think that we're trying to nickel and dime them. It's just like, look, most dog groomers that are in a corporate setting are getting paid, mostly per hour. It isn't like, you know, having you come back for that $10 nail trim more often is going to mean so much more money in their pocket. You know what I mean? Like, despite what you paid for the bath, that's not what the groomer's making. Okay, that's what the company's making, and the groomer's probably making far less than that. So just keep that in mind. Normally, the groomers are saying it because they have a genuine care and love for the dogs. It's a thankless job, so obviously they're going to go into it because they genuinely care for the dog. So that's why I love that. Way after I left, like this store started charging for weight, more than just like the breed and coat. It's a great way if a dog's obese to get him to start cutting weight, because it's like, hey, you're gonna save some money, and I'm actually helping you shave, add a couple more years onto the dog's life. Because some people just you know like a chubby puppy, and it's just like, oh, he's a chonker. It's like, oh my god. Yeah, yeah, and that chonker you're not going to be able to enjoy for as many years because you don't care about their waistline. Anyway, I digress. So, yeah, with the grooming thing, so here's where the dog is coming from. So they're uncomfortable. They see you, and they're like, "Hey, mom, dad, I don't like this. Can I not be doing this?" And then you're just like, "Hi, hi, hi. It's okay. It's cool. I'm here." They're like, "Okay, stupid humans not understanding dog body language. I'm gonna have to shout it from the mountains. Hey, hey!" And they start struggling against their restraint, and like they start getting more and more freaked out. Like they're like, "Well, you're clearly not picking up what I'm putting down." So they start acting more and more distressed, and it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more acting out the stress they are, the more distressed they are, and then pretty soon they get to the point where they're just like, "Okay, I'm locked in here with this person. You can't come rescue me, so I'm gonna have to fight my way out." And then that's when a frigging groomer gets bit. I mean, sorry if I'm coming across a little upset, but it's just like, clearly I've had some firsthand experience with this. All right, thankfully it wasn't a lasting scar, but you know, um, I almost had to have a beard the rest of my life because I almost needed to have a gross mark on my chin from an incident like this. So I'm not just telling tales out of school. I'm telling tales out of real life. So yeah, oftentimes remove yourself from situations. So if you didn't like how a puppy playtime went a couple of times, take yourself out of the puppy playtime. Come back later and find out how it went. And if it went great, then okay, clearly they were picking up on something that you were fretting about. Same thing with grooming. Same thing with walking down the street and then going after another dog. It's just like, if you can remove yourself from the equation, you find out that that's not at all how they behave when you're not there. Then you know that you're the problem, that you're the one who needs to work on it, and that you're obviously clearly either misreading signals or you're giving signals that they're misreading, and act accordingly. And then do it for a week. Going back to that week thing, do it for a week, see how that plays out, and then go from there. So, that's the biggest one. Most of the time, you can't take yourself out of the equation, and that's why I'm telling you, well, go ahead and try and change something that you're doing, and then do it for a week. This is kind of on subject, but it's not. And I've also mentioned it in nutrition, but I'm going to mention it again because this is kind of on theme. But so for instance, if you need to change the dog's food, and they go on a hunger strike, well, the last thing that you should do, I did touch upon this earlier, but the last thing that you should do is to immediately give in, because then they're going to learn the wrong lesson where it's just like, oh, if I get bored with the food, all I have to do is just refuse to eat it one morning, and then you're going to give me either human food, or you're going to give me a food of a completely different flavor. So okay, I was on the beef, and now you switch to the lamb. Well, the lamb was good, but after about a couple of days, well, maybe if I don't eat today, next time it's gonna be fish. Ah, it was fish. I'm so good at this human. Ah, this human is just my little B word. In this case, I have to censor myself because if I said bitch when it was a dog, that's not a swear because that's a female dog. But in this case, when it's regarding a human, yeah, you're my little B. So even though it's an adult one, I do still try and keep it, kosher. You don't necessarily have to, cuss to get your point across. And that's true with dog training too. So anyway, just to, have it all tie together as I go off on tangents. So yeah, definitely like I understand if you've ever owned cats before that I know that that's a completely different animal. Um, those guys can absolutely go on hunger strikes and actually start to lose weight. To the point where you panic. And I don't know, maybe there's a cat expert out there that would debunk what I just said and say, oh no, it's the same thing. They're just a little bit more aggressive about it. But yeah, with a dog, unless they have like a parasite or something really wrong with them, like a stomach blockage or something, there's no such thing as a dog that starves in front of a full food dish. So if you're changing their food and they're adverse to it, and it's for a very good and it's not for a very good reason. Like, so for instance, they might have an allergy to it that you find out later. It might be a far inferior food. You're trying to save a couple bucks, and they just sniff it, and they're just like, "Oh, that's junk. That's all corn and soy, and nothing that's healthy for me." And like, give me back on that high end brand that the vet for whatever reason told you to get off of, even though they were doing great on it. Sorry, tangents on stuff that's bugged me over the years. So, um, yeah. So, you know, the food thing is, I've touched upon it in the nutrition one, so we'll go ahead and revisit that if you want to. But this is just a great example of like, well, did you stick it out for a week? I mean, I know that seems like you're starving your dog, but again, a dog isn't starving in front of a full food dish. This is a willing choice. And oh, again, sorry, real quick disclaimer. Check the tooth health. I mean, if you're giving them hard food and their teeth hurt so bad because there's so many cavities you haven't addressed, and it actually it hurts their teeth more than it would hurt their hunger pains, then that's a different animal entirely. Like, if there's no health issues regarding the food, and they're just like trying to hold out because it worked before, and you gave them boiled chicken or ground hamburger, well, of course they're going to hold out again next time, and next time they're going to hold out even longer because you're just like, all right, well, I saw a video that said that it's like, all right, they're just doing this thing where they're testing you. So, like, then day 4 comes around, you're just like, well, they haven't eaten in 4 days. I have to give them something now, and then they just want again. And then maybe next time, if you're like really dig down and all right, I'm gonna do it because they said that I just taught them the wrong thing. Now they held up for 6 days, and day 5 they can smell the panic on you. You're panicking. They know it, and they know that they got you by day 6. So they just, even though they're really hungry, they hold up for one more day. So just keep in mind, yeah, dogs don't have the same biology as a wolf. A wolf pack can oftentimes, not eat for 2 weeks and, be okay as long as they have the good water source. Obviously, a lot of dog breeds are not going to be able to hold out for 2 weeks, but, they do have it in them. And so, again, just try not to break down right away. Whatever game plan that you have, just hold out for a week, whether it's, with the food, with the training, with the socializing, with anything else that I talk about today. You know, just the ability to stick it out for a week just to make sure that they're not testing you and that it might actually have worked. I mean, there's nothing more frustrating than, if you're a dog trainer and you see what's going on, you understand what's going on, you try to impart what's going on and what they should do accordingly. And then the next week, and that's most of the reason why, most dog training classes meet each week is like, it's a good practice. First of all, it's easier to set aside 1 week a day, 1 day a week rather, to do this because not just for everybody's schedule, but also because a lot of these things need a week to kick in. So you got to think about it that way. Um, there's just nothing more infuriating than if you're a dog trainer, like this is a plan of attack, it's gonna work, but you got to be strong, you got to hold out, and then they come back and they were just like, yeah, well, I mean, it was 3 days. I mean, that's animal cruelty at that point. It's like if animal services, and it's like, no, 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 that's why I try to squash it in the bud anytime that I was a dog trainer. It's just like, once I get more of a veteran about it, I would be like, now if this happens, I'm gonna tell you step by step, this is what's gonna go down, and then you're gonna act accordingly and not do that. So yeah, with puppies, it's the same thing. Like let's say that they are very mouthy. Well, first of all, can you fault them for it? I mean, they have teeth growing in. If you've ever been an actual human parent, that teething is very painful for the baby. You give them something cold to, like, gum on. Like it's literally sharp teeth, like poking through gum. And so like with a dog, it's no different. Like they have a huge desire to chew, first of all, just because, their mouth is their hands. Like our hands are how we interact with a lot of the world. Their mouth is how they interact with 90% of the world. So, first of all, they're already going to want to put everything in their mouth to just see, oh, is this a mouth thing or is this a not mouth thing? Um, so with mouthing, oftentimes you're playing with them, they bite your hand, you go, ow, you pull away, and then you try and go back to playing with them, and then they're like, ah, rah, 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 and then it just gets worse and worse and worse, and you're just like, oh my god, I'm going to have band-aids all over my hands, this dog is going to be like a biter, and by the way, it's mouthing, not biting. Biting is a far different animal. Biting is biting is a her, and hold on. Call it mouthing, please. Biting is biting, mouthing is mouthing. Is a difference, and it's an important distinction, especially if you're trying to tell a dog trainer the issues that you want to work on with the dog, and you say that they bite. Well, initially, Unless the dog trainer probes, a lot of dog trainers, at least in corporate gigs, are not able to deal with any aggression. And if they say that, well, they're a biter, then if they don't probe, they might say, oh, well, then that's something you have to take to a behaviorist. That's going to be thousands of dollars. What you actually meant to say with mouthing, and they're just like, oh, that happens. It should go away in about a year. But if you want to help nip it in the bud early, here's some tactics that you can do. So and we'll get to that. But again, first we're gonna go with, all right. So you go, ow, and you pull your hand away. Ow, you pull your hand away, and it keeps getting worse. Guess what you should do? If this was an interactive, actually wait for the answer, because by this point you should know. Do something different other than ow and pulling your hand away. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Maybe completely don't react and just become boring for at least a minimum of 5 seconds. And, then try and go. And then if that happens again, then it's just like, oh, crap, now I'm boring again. And, see if that works. Like, they're trying to get again, reaction from you. If you're giving them the reaction and you think it's a negative one, but they don't seem to mind and they keep on going after your hand, change tactics. Don't react like that. Stand up and walk away. Ignore them for a little bit. It seems cruel. It's not. It's actually teaching them that, oh, that is not behavior that's going to get the desired effect. I'm not going to continue to be entertaining and engaging if you do that. So, or, another good one is to substitute a toy. Oh, if you're in a mouthy mood, here's a toy. Here's a toy that you're allowed to mouth on. Here's what's going on with the dog. It's like, again, the dog has that reaction, and if they were with their litter mates, they would absolutely be gnawing and biting on each other. But they have fur, they have thick skin. To them, it's not as painful, and obviously the dog will, tell them what's what. If they do bite too hard. But in your case, what you're doing is acting like a prey animal once again. It all ties together. It all comes back to callback. You're acting like a prey animal that's activating their predator drive. They're just like, dude, you're huge. And I'm making you act like prey. I am money. I am just like so friggin' dog. It's insane. Like, oh, I feel like that wolf coming on in me. Like, look at this. Look at me being a wolf to you. I thought you were the master. Maybe I'm the master. You know what I mean? Like, it's already getting to that point. So with the dog, don't act like prey. Offer them a substitute that's acceptable. And if they're gnawing on that substitute, encourage them. Or, like I said, be boring. Try to be like, if you're just like, oh crap, I died. I can't play with you for at least a good 5 seconds, and every time you bite, I have to be boring again. And they're just like, why don't you be boring? I want to keep this back and forth going. And then they learn, oh, it's because I bit too hard. Well, maybe just like licking or, any other type of activity. This is maybe often, like when, catch can start coming into play. But yeah, so you kind of get the idea. I mean, I could go over example after example. I mean, you're basically getting free training out of me, so I know you'd love for me to, but I mean, at some point, I gotta just kind of let you take the reins and kind of go from there. But so just something to keep in mind: if you have a behavior that is unwanted and it keeps seeming to get worse, change up tactics. If you can't take yourself out of the equation entirely, and then learn what the other person did, and then just go from there. And try the tactic out, stick with it consistently as possible for at least a week. And again, at the end of the week, reassess. Has it gotten worse? Change tactics. Has it stayed the same? Maybe give it another week. Has it gotten better? Continue doing what you do consistently. And go from there. And, it's stop trying to do what makes sense to you, because dogs are wired a completely different way. If it makes sense to you, but the thing is still happening and still getting worse, well, I don't care how much sense it makes in your head. To the dog, they're getting a completely different, story in their head. So, switch it up. Reach out, ask for advice. But whatever you do, stop doing what you're doing, because if a situation escalates, more often than not, it's going to end in tears. Especially if the dog just seemed a little too aggressive when they were in playtime, and that can escalate to a dog biting for real. Drawing blood, ripping skin, vet bills, possibly dog getting put down. If the dog, is uncomfortable at the vet, and you just keep trying different vets, and it gets to the point where now every vet that you've tried says they have to go to groomer. Ah, bad me. Just at the end, too. I always manage to make a nice little mistake at the end that embarrasses me, so that you get to have a little haha at my expense, and that's all right. But yeah, if you go to groomer after groomer after groomer, it keeps getting worse to the point where they say, well, now you have to take them to a vet because they're so worked up that they actually need to be anesthetized in order to be able to even have their nails done. Well, this is something you could have fixed early on if you had just changed tactics, if you just, listened to their advice and walked away for a minute so that you weren't in the window and the dog was like, okay, I don't have the human to help me, so I'm just going to have to try and brave this situation as best I can. Oh, that wasn't so bad. And then if you do it on a regular basis, they'll remember, oh yeah, this is the uncomfortable thing, but it isn't so bad, and I'll get over it, and then I'll get maybe a treat at the end. I always recommend, giving them a reward for being a good puppy. So yeah, keep that in mind. Change tactics, 1 week rule, and that'll help a majority of your unwanted behaviors. And then if you're still having problems, then yeah, absolutely consult a professional. Maybe watch another one of my videos that might be dealing with that subject. But that's a great starting point, I feel like. And please just take it to heart. Hopefully, at one of these points, I'll have like a good little mnemonic scheme in order to have you remember. But for right now, I think that's pretty simple. Change your tactics, 1 week rule, and good luck. I know it's not easy, and I know it seems counterintuitive, but you got this. You got this, and honestly, I'm such a dog lover that I can safely say that you were probably right in choosing to burden yourself with all this extra work because in the long run, you're giving them a much better life than they probably would have had, and they added a couple of years onto yours just through sheer lowered blood pressure. So kudos to you for trying to stick it out and watch videos like mine where you try to get some help because I know you need it. And again, just keep the faith. You got this. All right. Good luck.